Minister Richard Feehan represents the riding of Edmonton-Rutherford. Back on February 2nd of this year, he was appointed Minister of Indigenous Relations with the Alberta government. Minister Feehan, welcome to CFWE and happy Aboriginal Day.
Happy Aboriginal Day to you and to everyone listening. Great to be here.
Minister, let's get right to it. What does Aboriginal Day mean for you personally?
Well, it's of course a day of celebration, and that's the most important piece. And I think that's a great part of what we're trying to do when we talk about reconciliation. Reconciliation isn't just about saying, I'm sorry for the past, although that's a very important part of it. It's also about saying the future is great, the future is going to be better, and we can have some real joy instead of some of the pain that we've had in the past. And the Aboriginal Day is a day to do that, to say, hey, there's huge successes, there's great, exciting things going on. I tell you, as I go around the province, I am just constantly thrilled and amazed at all the incredible things that are happening in this province, from the very southern tip right up to the small reserves in the northern part. And I come back and I say to people, you want to know what's happening? You know what they're doing? And I just, constantly news stories. I mean, there's such a news story about the Aboriginal experience in this province. And I tell people, we're at a nexus right now. I mean, there is an old story, there's an old history, but it is absolutely changing. And I'm delighted that my kids are going to grow up with a very different story than that other people may have had in the past. And Aboriginal Day, that's a big part of it. It's about celebrating, getting together, and nation-to-nation conversations. My nation meets your nation, and we have a good time. That seems like a pretty good thing to be doing.
Minister, let's discuss some of the Indigenous initiatives your government has been working on since taking office.
Well, it's actually quite extensive. When we first became government, the first thing we did is we said that we want things to be different. That's it. And that started with an apology for our provincial part in the residential schools, which I think was long overdue and never been done in this province, and then immediately moved into an adoption of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And that's taken us through this process over the last year, where we asked every single ministry to read that document and say, so what should we be doing differently given what it says in this document, the invitations that are there, the demands for action that are there. And not only did we do it internally, but we asked community organizations to do it, Métis, Inuit, and as well as the First Nations and women's groups and the friendship centers. We asked everybody, help us do this. You look at the document, you tell us what should be different. And so we've had this great year of everybody getting themselves up to speed, thinking about these things, and now we're starting this process where we're actually meeting at tables to have the conversation about, okay, we say we accept this document. What does that actually mean on the ground? What are we doing to actually make a change? And where is it a policy change? Where is it a behavior change? And where is it a law change? And we're looking at all of that stuff. It's pretty exciting. And, we actually sat down not too long ago and put a chart together of all the initiatives we have. And we have 14 major initiatives, and that's only one of them. Because it really is time. It's time to move on things. And I know people have been waiting for, whole lifetimes for a transformation to occur. And people are ready. And so are we.
Take us back to when you were first approached to become the minister.
I think it's just exciting. And I wanted to, I've been a social worker for almost 5 years now. And I've worked with many Indigenous communities along the way who've really been trying to work on the healing, on the transformation piece. And one of the reasons why I decided to run for government is, I think I made a contribution. I know one-on-one as a therapist, for example, working with kids that had been through trauma and the families. I also felt that it was something needed to happen on a much grander scale. It's great when one person finds healing and starts to move along in their life, but we need to do that as two nations who have had a traumatic history, and we need to heal as two nations together. And so becoming an MLA allowed me the chance to do that. And then Premier Notley came to me and said, I want you to do that specifically with the Indigenous community. And that just felt like such an honor and privilege to me. I was pretty excited to do that. And I made the commitment that I would go and visit every community, all 48 of the reserves and all 8 of the settlements. And then, of course, there's many people who don't live on either, and I've made commitment to go visit as many people as I can in other venues. And what it is for me is it's really a process of learning what it is that people need to make the transition happen. And as I learn, I then figure out what's the action that goes with that, and then we move ahead. So it's been a pretty exciting year, and I can tell you there's going to be lots more coming.
Minister, what's your relationship like with Minister Carolyn Bennett?
Well, you know, I think in the 4 months that I've been here, I've met with her 4 times, so that's not too bad. We noticed actually when we came in that there wasn't much of a relationship between the provincial governments and the federal government in terms of Indigenous relations. Well, perhaps across the board, but I'm aware of it in Indigenous relations. And so we made a decision right away that it had to change. You can't have one group of people talking together when there's supposed to be 3 groups of people talking together. And so we're really working on that. She seems quite open to it, by the way. I've been quite happy at the reception. And I sit on a couple of particular committees with her. For example, we are working together on the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry process right now, and hopefully there'll be an announcement on that coming up very soon, Minister Bennett tells me. And of course, we've also had an opportunity to speak about a few other things. For example, we had a meeting with our Minister of Education and Minister Bennett and myself to talk specifically about Indigenous education in this province. Not only education in our public school system so that we can teach people about the true history of racism and true history of Indigenous presence in this land we now call Canada, and true history of the residential schools and all of those pieces, but also about celebrating the culture and moving forward. But also, we're also working to change the curriculum for people who live on reserves because we know there's a big gap between the school systems on reserve and the school systems off the reserve. And that's partly been because in the past provincial governments have said, well, schools or anything that happens on reserve is really a federal issue. And then they kind of wipe their hands of it. And we just have come along and said this is not acceptable. We're going to do this differently. You're Albertans, therefore we need to do stuff, and we'll just do that, and then we'll bring in the federal government whenever necessary, but we won't wait for them. Kind of a Jordan's principle notion, that you just go ahead and do what's right, and then you figure out the dollars or whatever it is, or other policy issues after the fact. So kind of exciting. We already signed the Kataskanau agreement with one group of communities, and we're looking at signing a similar education agreement with the Musqueam communities as well. So that's moving along. There's just so many initiatives. It's I think we're exhausting people on both sides of the table because every time we get together we say, oh, that's one more thing we should be doing. Right. And I know people have been waiting, and it feels like we've been in government for a year, and they maybe haven't seen that much happen. That's very different, and I appreciate that that's the experience. But that's really because we've been doing all the work to make sure that the policies and the structures are in place so that we can make the change. And sometimes you have to change the fundamental structure. You build a building, the first thing you put up is the iron girders, and that doesn't look all that exciting. I'm sure you've seen a building get built, and it seems to take a long time to get that basic structure in. Then all of a sudden, you just see this click, 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 all these things go up. And it's kind of that same way with social policy. You do the structural piece first, and then all of a sudden, all the pieces that attach to that structural piece go up, and they seem to go up much quicker. I know if you've ever seen a house or a building get built, you can see it jumps like that.
Sure. One of the biggest topics right now with Indigenous people, of course, the recent decision by the Supreme Court of Canada ruling that Métis people and non-status Indians are now considered Indians. What's the take from the Alberta government on this?
Well, we need to work with the communities to decide what that actually means, because it wasn't that suddenly everybody's going to get a status card. Right? They're saying that under the Act, under one section of the Act, they will be deemed Indians for the purposes of that section of the Act. Mm-hmm. And so we need to start to figure out now, so what is the implication of that? And I know that there'll be some differences of opinion, that some of the First Nations communities may have a different opinion about that than some of the Métis communities. But What we have committed to is a very different kind of process than in the past. The process we'll be engaging in is an actual conversation where we actually go talk to people about their experience and ask them, what does this mean to you? And how do we act on this in a responsible and respectful manner? We accept the decision. It's what's been decided based on the laws of the land, based on a history of trees and relationship with the First Peoples of this country. And so our job is now to say, how do we then act responsibly, given that that's what we've been told is the right thing to do?
What is that one goal you want to achieve while sitting as the Minister of Indigenous Affairs?
I'm a bit of a policy wonk, and I don't just have one goal. I have 14 initiatives going ahead. But I respect the question because you want to know what it is I want to achieve. And I can tell you one thing that I'm very excited about right now is we're transforming this economy in this province. We've been dependent on oil and gas for a long time. And there's been some benefit for that, but not everybody is shared in that benefit. And I think that's really unacceptable. So we are transforming this economy away from a singular dependence on a singular product called oil, and we're moving into a much greener-based economy. And so one of the things that I am really wanting to work toward is I want the Indigenous communities to bring that deep respect and knowledge of the land forward so that we can take care of our climate, and we can take care of our land and take care of our water. And I think that the Indigenous communities have really something strong to offer in that particular area. So I'm wanting them to be really a big part of the climate change initiative. If I could have it my way, every reserve would have a district energy system based on renewables that they would not only be able to supply their own communities, but would contribute to the larger grid in the province, and perhaps even have a place where they have jobs and income source and so on. So my intention is to just open the doors for those possibilities. And I know many of the communities already moved on this area and are looking forward to moving ahead. So that's going to be a big part of our initiative. Of course, I have to say at the same time that what's underlying all of this is a deep respect for the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And it's a very important document, and my job is to make sure that we keep going back to it every step along the way. Whenever we do anything, let's go back to that document and say, are we actually fulfilling this? The calls to action that are there, and that, of course, includes the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So, I know you asked me for one thing, but it's impossible. There's so much happening here. I just get really excited about it, and I'm really looking forward to where we're going.
Minister Richard Feehan, the Minister of Indigenous Relations with the Alberta government, thank you so much for coming, and happy Aboriginal Day.
Yes, well, happy Aboriginal Day to you, and congratulations on increasing the power of your Edmonton area transmitter, because I really hope you can build the audience, and we'll have lots more opportunity to have conversations in the future.